significance of Migrants' Day?
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, on the 18th of December 1990, so that's today 25 years ago, the UN passed a resolution on the protection of the rights of all migrant workers and their families. And I would say that this resolution remains as relevant today as it was at the time. Unfortunately, still, we see in many cases that migrants are being marginalized, being vilified, but also that many migrants, as we have seen particularly in the Mediterranean, undertake a very perilous journey. And we have seen in the past year, 2015, that over 3,700 migrants have lost their lives in the Mediterranean Sea. So just to illustrate how dangerous the journey is for a lot of migrants still. And this is only in the Mediterranean. Worldwide, we're looking at about more than 5,000 migrants that have lost their lives in that journey to reach a better life and to establish a better situation for themselves and their families.
Yeah. I mean, after years of overcoming slavery and colonizations, who would have thought that Africa would actually go back to their colonizers in search of a better future? It's almost inconceivable in the year 2016.
Absolutely, and there's still a lot of economic disparities between many countries in Europe and between the continents. And to a certain extent, we see the same trend between a lot of African countries and South Africa as well. The main driving force behind migration to South Africa, of course, is also the economic disparities. If you look at the GDP between Mozambique or between Zimbabwe and South Africa, the disparities are huge. It's understandable that people who live in abject poverty and see economic opportunities just across the barbed wire fence with South Africa, that they would seek to explore those opportunities as well and seek to build a better life for themselves and their families.
Yeah. What is the role of the IOM? For instance, what part have you played in this current crisis that we've been seeing unfolding this year?
Well, IOM prides itself in being able to assist governments in any stage of the migration process. So our assistance starts in the pre-migration process, so before migrants actually choose to start a journey. And we do so by giving information on the living conditions in the country of destination, or the country that people want to go to. Because this is, I think, some of the part of the issue at the moment is that people come with unrealistic expectations, and to the extent that we can contribute to people's rational decision making on whether or not to undertake a journey, we of course think that's very important. Secondly, is the actual migration process, and then we see that people still fall prey to traffickers and smugglers. And of course the risks of the journey. People drown on their way. People suffocate in back of trucks. People get arrested, detained, exploited, etc. And then finally the stage of arrival and settlement, where we try to help people integrate in society and try to help governments create favorable conditions for migrants to lead a productive and constructive life in the country of destination.
Yeah.
And then at some point, if the integration actually doesn't work, then also we do help migrants return home. So if there are stranded migrants in the country of destination who do not see a future for themselves in South Africa, for example, and are willing to go back, in some cases we are able to assist those migrants in going back to the country of origin.
Yeah, when we I think of the year 2015, it certainly, in a very sad way, will be remembered as the year of the refugee. And the boy on the beach, the image of the boy on the beach, little Alan Kurdi, I mean, that was a devastating story that catapulted the plight of migrants into the spotlight, and it certainly did pull a lot of heartstrings and just talk about the issues that are facing these migrants. Did it make a difference, though? I mean, this young child lying dead on a beach, hoping to find a better life, with the help of his family. Did it help? Has it changed anything?
Well, certainly, I think in terms of awareness, it has done a lot. A lot of people have suddenly become aware that these are the danger journeys that people are undertaking, and people may have been like somewhat aware, but this really projected it into the public consciousness, and people were aware that the desperation that people face that drives them to load their kids onto a small and dangerous little boat in order to reach Europe. The mere desperation that speaks of those actions, I think, is something that a lot of people perhaps were not aware of. So seeing that and of course it wasn't a single case. I mean, that particular photo was, like you said, was quite telling. But there's a lot of cases like that. About 30% of the migrant deaths at the Mediterranean were kids under the age of 18, and then a very large part of those were actually infants. So children in particular are extremely vulnerable when they undertake those journeys. It's 1 out of 5 children, 1 out of 5 migrants that cross the Mediterranean are children, but 30% of the migrants, 30% of the deaths are children. So it shows that migrant children in particular are extremely vulnerable for those kind of journeys. And I think it is important for people to be aware of that. We've seen a lot of political changes in Europe. Funds have been made available. There's negotiations between the EU member states. To what extent the Schengen zone is viable, or to what extent it needs adjustments. And so a lot of things are changing, but a lot of work still needs to be done.
Most definitely, and I can see that there's the final EU summit that's actually taking place, and the issue of migrants is topping the agenda. But let's just talk a little bit about last month. There was a meeting held in Malta, and about 1.8 billion rand was offered for the African governments towards programs that will assist in building economic stability. What are some of the resolutions that were actually arrived at?
Yeah, it's actually 1.8 billion euros.
I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Thank you for the correction.
Yeah,
Sure.
No, it seems like quite a bit of money. But if you look at the whole of the EU, and if you look at the whole of Africa, then it's ultimately I would say it's a drop in the bucket. Much more money is going to be required in order to really address the root causes of migration. If you look at some of the actions that this fund is supposed to address, it's economic stabilization. So going into the countries of origin and trying to address the driving force, the driving force behind migration. So the inequality, the poverty, but also the instability in the countries of origin. And for the whole of Africa to allocate 1.8 billion euros, which sounds like a big number, but if you look at
it's really not.
For the whole of Africa, you've got to wonder whether it's going to be sufficient.
You know, the one problem, however, just to elaborate on what you're saying, is that, you know, we see the exodus of people leaving their countries is neither a random nor a voluntary act. I mean, it has a lot to do with matters of governance in these countries, that the conditions are not right for people to be living in. And then, of course, you give money towards it and you hope it goes to the right cause. Now, you know, this is one of the problems, is that you hope that the governments will actually do something and that they will change to ensure that there isn't this migrant crisis taking place. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you got to be you could be very cynical about this and say the people who move are typically the poor migrants. So the ones that they don't have a lot of economic opportunities in the country of origin. So are some countries perhaps not too unhappy to see them leave? And it's a very cynical view, but it's something that I think is perhaps worth considering. So to what extent are the governments really committed to changing the fate of these people? And then, of course, in many countries there's the ethnic component, where migration is seen as a solution as well to displace parts of the population that the countries don't consider particularly welcome. But overall, we do feel that the governments are willing to improve the fate of their populations and to try to keep the people in the country, to try to improve their economic situation. But it is a hard one, and then if you look at it, you see migrants leave the country of origin to flee poverty, and then they arrive in Europe, or then they arrive in South Africa, and what happens is that they're not able to find work. We've seen migrants in Europe also living in abject poverty, sharing a small apartment with 20 people, going out during the day to beg for money. They actually really haven't improved their fate. And then, going back to the point that I was trying to make earlier, people have to make a rational decision. And I think we have an important role as IOM to help people make a rational decision based on the real living conditions in the country of destination.
Indeed, indeed.
People go to Europe, people go to South Africa, hoping that the moment I get to South Africa, the moment I get to Europe, I'll be wealthy, I'll make a lot of money, I'll be able to send money back home and help my family live a better life. And actually, in many cases, that is not the case.
That's not the
case.
case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Richard, let's leave it there for this morning, but thank you very much for talking to us on this International Migrants Day. Richard Ots is the Chief of Mission of IOM South Africa. Thank you very much for talking to us here on the program.
Pleasure
Right,
to be here.
let's take a break. When we return,